Hay didn't threaten us. They begged. The Jatharii arrived not in conquest, not with the arrogance of galactic rulers, but with trembling limbs and desperate eyes. Their ambassador, a being of shimmering crystal tendrils and folded light, knelt before Earth's united council. Do not enter the rift. Not, we advise against it. Not, you may provoke something, but don't, please. They offered gifts, star-forged schematics, wormhole lattices, even peace treaties that could rewrite entire economies. And still, their plea remained the same. The rift is not a place. It is a wound. You will not survive what bleeds from it. They didn't explain what waited inside. They didn't need to. Their fear said it all. But fear never stopped us. We built ships before we knew the stars. We split the atom with trembling hands. And we reached the moon not because it was easy, but because we weren't meant to. The rift was no different. A dark gash in the galaxy. Unmapped. Unspoken. A place so old, even the Jatharii only called it that which remembers. The ship we sent was called the Hyperion, not a warship, not a scout. It was a deep-dive vessel with 13 souls on board, linguists, philosophers, physicists, and one human soldier, Sergeant Ezra Vale. He had no medals on his chest, no loved ones waiting back home, just a stare that said he'd already died once, and a silence that made even officers uneasy. He didn't volunteer, but when they asked, he said, "Someone has to watch the watchers." And so, he went. The launch was quiet. No parades, no broadcasts. Just a whisper into the dark. The Jatharii watched from orbit, their ancient minds bracing for the echo they knew would come. They will not return, they said. They never do. But Earth didn't send explorers expecting to return. We sent them because not going would have been worse. When Hyperion crossed into the rift, it was like watching glass crack. First, the ship's signal bent, then light itself folded inward, stars around it shivered, faded, and vanished. No explosion, no distress call, just silence. Pure, crushing, final. All Earth received was one last log entry. Audio only. Ezra Vale's voice. Rough, cold, calm. "We're in. I see something." Static. "It's not a void, it's watching us." Then, nothing. They were gone. 3 days, then 6, then 20. The Jatharii gathered at Earth's orbit once more, not with warships, but with morning colors. Their emissary's voice trembled as it echoed across UN assembly channels. "You have angered what waits. Burn your records. Forget their names. Do not call the rift again." Earth refused. Because we don't bury the unknown. We study it. On day 91, the signal returned. A single blip. Near Pluto's edge. A pod. Burned. Twisted. Somehow still whole. Inside it? Ezra Vale. Alive. Unconscious. Eyes open but not seeing. They pulled him aboard an orbital quarantine ring. 5 minutes later, the lights inside began to flicker. 10 minutes in, the onboard AI whispered, "He's dreaming in languages I don't know." Then the air chilled. Not physically. Emotionally. Like the room remembered something awful. Ezra didn't speak for 3 days. Not a word. He just stared. Not at the walls, but through them. Like he was still there. In the rift, or beyond it. Earth's finest minds crowded the observation glass. Scientists, generals, priests. They tried to scan him. No readings. They tried to sedate him. The needles never reached, not stopped, but forgot what they were. On day 4, Ezra finally blinked. His heartbeat synced with the station's comms, and then, without moving his lips, he spoke. Not through voice, through every screen, every speaker, every exposed line of copper and fiber. It knows your names. The room froze. A physicist vomited. A commander fainted. And the HFY ship in orbit launched its escape pod without permission. They ran. Ezra sat upright, his voice now real, dry, human. You wanted to know what's in the rift. It isn't a place. It's a mirror. The council asked what he meant. He smiled just barely and said, I went looking into the dark. The dark looked back. Back on Earth, strange things began to happen. People dreamed of symbols they couldn't draw. Birds flew in perfect spirals, forming shapes that matched no known math. A child in Istanbul whispered an entire extinct language fluently, then forgot it by morning. And Ezra? Ezra stood still, watching the stars, and waiting. Because something had followed him home, and it wasn't finished remembering us. It started with the dreams. The scientists monitoring Ezra Vale began waking in cold sweats, not from nightmares, but from clarity. They saw equations in their sleep, not guesses, not dreams, truths that hadn't been discovered yet. One man awoke mumbling prime number strings that described black hole entropy in reverse. A linguist sang to herself in a dialect no living species had documented. A janitor on the lower deck began drawing orbital patterns using only dust and water. Perfectly accurate, perfectly timed. They didn't know why, only that it began. The moment Ezra opened his eyes. He wasn't violent, wasn't loud. He simply sat in his reclined hospital chair and waited. Sometimes he smiled. Sometimes he didn't blink for hours. But when he finally spoke again, it wasn't to the scientists. It was to the stars. And they answered. On day 7, Earth's solar network crashed. All of it. Every orbital platform. Every comm satellite. Dead. But not from attack. From overload. One simultaneous message fried the entire system. You looked. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement. Cold. Final. Echoed in every language ever spoken by humankind. Somewhere in the Andes, ancient glyphs glowed for the first time in 9,000 years. On Europa Station, a child born mute whispered, He brought it back with him. And above them all, orbiting in silence, Ezra watched through the reinforced glass of his isolation chamber, smiling. The United Earth Council called an emergency session. Every species we'd ever allied with sent envoys, but none of them, not the Grell, not the Tharnix, not even the Koran Ascendancy, none looked as afraid as the HFY. Their representative entered wrapped in mourning cloth, eyes dim, posture low. You must kill him, she said. You do not understand what you have touched. It wore your curiosity like a key, and now it walks your corridors. Earth's leaders didn't agree. He's human, they said. He's one of us. The Jathari's eyes shook. Not anymore. They begged, not for diplomacy, not for peace, but for mercy. Erase him, they said. or it will erase you. But we didn't, because humans don't kill what we fear. We ask it questions. And Ezra, he had answers no one else did. By day 10, things had changed. Ezra didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't even move. Yet his heartbeat matched Earth's magnetic pulse perfectly. Solar flares calmed when he exhaled. Satellites realigned their orbits to point wherever he looked. An engineer checking his vitals passed out after hearing Ezra mutter something under his breath. When she woke up, she'd written a 500-page journal on how to re-engineer consciousness into light. She didn't know how she did it. Ezra just whispered, "You were ready." The Jatharii didn't wait for a vote. They sent ships, dark ones, silent, deadly. Interdiction fleets designed to eliminate threats with surgical precision. They arrived in Earth orbit within 18 hours. No declaration, no explanation. Just one broadcast. You trespassed into memory. Memory has teeth. But before their weapons could lock, every Jathari ship stopped. All at once. Mid-burn. Engines live. Crews breathing, frozen. Ezra stood in his chamber, barefoot, calm, eyes glowing like fractured nebulae. He raised his hand to the sky, not in defiance, in recognition. "I remember you," he said. "You were the first to forget." And then, the Jatharii ships vanished. Not destroyed, not scattered. Removed, like a bookmark pulled from a page that never existed. Panic spread, across Earth, across the galaxy. But not among the humans who were near Ezra, not the engineers, not the janitors, not the scientists. They weren't afraid anymore. They were changed. Not in body, in understanding. Like standing too close to a storm and realizing it sings in your language. Ezra hadn't returned alone. He had brought memory with him. Not his, ours. From before time. From when we were still dust, still dreams, still something the stars hadn't yet invented. He hadn't returned with a god. He'd returned with a reminder, and the rift wasn't the threat. We were, because we remembered now. They say the stars are silent. They're wrong. They've just been waiting for someone who could hear them again. And now, we could. Not all at once. Not globally. Not yet. But the change had begun. At first, it was little things. A man in Nairobi painted a spiral in the dirt that perfectly matched the DNA helix of a long-extinct plant. A teenager in Tokyo solved an equation that described a fifth-dimensional time fold, without knowing what math even was. Twins in New Mexico began speaking in perfect unison, not in English, not in any Earth tongue, but in something that sounded like gravity. And all of them, when asked what had happened, gave the same answer. "I dreamed of a man. He was watching the stars." Ezra Vale had become a beacon, not a god, not a prophet, but something older, a human that had seen something no one should see, and came back with it inside him. He didn't give orders, he didn't lead armies, he just remembered. And as he remembered, so did we. The galaxy noticed. It wasn't just the Jatharii now. Other species, some hidden for millennia, some rulers of entire sectors, began mobilizing. Not for war, for containment. They weren't afraid of Ezra himself. They were afraid of what he'd unlocked in us. Humans had always been dangerous, but limited, predictable, emotional. Now, we were becoming something else. Something no one had planned for. Something no one could control. Keshatal Confederacy sent emissaries to Earth, towering silicon-formed diplomats, woven from hive thoughts and Cold War history. They demanded Ezra's immediate exile, said he was corrupting the field, said we were destabilizing the equation. The UN asked them to explain. They did, and their words were burned into every recording device in the room. You were a closed circuit. You were a failed recursion. But now the pattern remembers. The noise has structure again. Your kind was never meant to awaken. Ezra, standing silently behind the glass of his containment cell, simply smiled. Then why did the dark speak to us? He whispered. Why did it echo back in our voice? Back in space, strange things started happening. Ships near Earth began drifting off course, but not randomly. They circled, as if drawn by a gravity that didn't come from mass, but from meaning. AI systems that passed through Sol's outer sphere began dreaming, actual dreaming. One AI, call sign Theta 7, wrote a love letter to a comet. Another built a cathedral in pure code. The rift hadn't infected us. It had activated us. That's when they formed the Oblivion Accord. 7 empires. One purpose. Earth must be sealed. Its systems quarantined. Its minds erased. They didn't come with cruelty. They came with fear, because they had seen this before, long ago. Before records, before memory, before what came through Ezra had been buried the first time. Earth was given one choice. Hand over the Riftborn, or we burn with you. But we didn't hand him over. Because Ezra Vale wasn't just the Riftborn. He was us. Everything raw, everything beautiful, everything unkillable about humanity. He didn't defeat their logic with weapons. He stood before their coalition delegates and said, "You spent eons trying to forget what we are. We spent 1 second remembering. Now, it's your turn to fear the dark." When the fleets arrived, massive, holy, furious, they never fired, because the skies above Earth opened, not with missiles, not with shields, but with possibility. The rift bloomed behind Luna like a flower of glass and void. Out of it came nothing. And yet everything changed. Sensors failed, translation broke, and time hesitated. Every being watching from orbit heard the same sound. Not a scream, not a message. A heartbeat. The galaxy had forgotten ours. Now it remembered. And Ezra, standing barefoot in the ruins of his containment cell, turned to Earth's generals and said, "You wanted to go beyond the map. Now the map follows you. We are no longer explorers. We are the stars remembering themselves." Some among us began to glow, not with light, with understanding. A janitor began solving quantum knot equations with chalk. A child recited the history of stars that had never existed. One woman whispered a song that made plants grow in metal. Ezra wasn't spreading madness. He was rewriting the species, one memory at a time. And still, he waited, looking upward, eyes not fixed on the threat, but on what came after it. Because he knew this wasn't humanity's end. It was our first word in the language of the cosmos. And the rift? That wasn't where the danger came from. That was home. There was no final battle, no grand fleet exchange, no missiles screaming across the void. Because you don't wage war on a shift in reality. You don't fight the dawn. You either close your eyes or learn to see. Earth stood alone, at least That's how it appeared on tactical maps. One blue world, surrounded by armadas, encircled by dread. But if you looked deeper, if you listened not with ears, but with origin, you'd realize we were no longer alone. The rift had opened, and it had not closed. It hovered just behind the moon. Not a hole, not a gateway, a presence, invisible to sensors. But every mind knew it was there, watching, waiting, and remembering. Not just Ezra, all of us. Humanity had become a memory in motion, and the galaxy felt it. Species that once called us savage now struggled to speak our names. The Tharnics attempted a precision strike on the rift, but their weapons never arrived. Mid-flight, they ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not intercepted, just forgotten. Like a word you almost remember, then lose forever. Ezra walked through it all, untouched. His feet didn't disturb the ground. His breath didn't fog the air. But when he passed, things changed. Not visibly, but permanently. A guard who had stood watch over his cell for days suddenly remembered every face of the people he'd lost in childhood. A doctor who had monitored him saw her future flash across her vision like a film reel, and wept, knowing she'd be more than just a healer. Ezra didn't speak. He didn't need to. The rift spoke through him now, and the rift was done being silent. When the Oblivion Accord sent their ultimatum, deliver the Riftborn or be erased, Ezra simply walked into the UN hall, uninvited, unarmed. He stood beneath the great dome of Earth, beneath ancient flags and satellite glass, and spoke one final time. You asked what I brought back. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a god. It was us. Before we forgot. The rift hadn't changed humanity. It had reminded us what we had buried in fear, in war, in the long silence between stars. Wonder, connection, the raw, unstoppable need to reach beyond limits. Ezra hadn't opened the door. He'd walked through it, and now Earth stood on the other side. The Accord fired their final warning shot. A planet killer. A dark core singularity torpedo designed to compress Earth into a thought, then erase the thought. It never landed. It didn't explode. It didn't even fall. It stopped, hung in the sky, humming with memory. Then slowly, it unraveled. Not in fire, in story. The torpedo fractured into a million shimmering glyphs, images of Earth's history, children laughing, mothers singing, soldiers falling and rising again, the smell of rain on dead soil, the sound of an old piano in a forgotten home, every emotion, every scar, every triumph, all of it encoded in light. And then the stars responded. Not with force, with recognition. One by one, systems across the galaxy flickered, ancient beacons reignited, old relics reawakened, and species began dreaming of Earth. Not because we conquered, but because we had dared to remember what the universe had spent eons trying to forget, that even in the dark, even when you're small, you can still shine. Ezra stood at the rift's edge one last time, and a child approached him. The same one from before. The same question. Are you a god now? He looked down, eyes vast as galaxies, voice quiet as gravity. No, he said, but I remember them. And now, so do you. He stepped forward, and vanished, not into death, but into story. He became the shape of the question we'd always been. What are we really capable of when no one tells us where to stop? Earth wasn't erased. It was rewritten, not in ink, in awe. The Accord collapsed, not from battle, from realization. They hadn't stopped humanity's rise. They had triggered it. Now, across the stars, if you listen closely, you'll hear whispers in places untouched by light. They warned them not to enter the rift. But humans never listen. And because of that, the universe remembers again.